This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Chapter 24, Scouting and Discoveries, and our symbol is Matt's dice, or the dice, or just dice, whatever, I don't know.
It could also be the dice Terangrial that they talk about here.
It could be. They talk about that in the next chapter. Sunlight through the carved shutters, creeping across the bed, woke Matt. For a moment, he only lay there, frowning. He had not reasoned out any plan for escaping Tarvalin before sleep had overtaken him. But neither had he given up. Too much memory still lay covered with fog, but he would not give up. 2 serving women came bustling with hot water and a tray heavy with food, laughing and telling him how much better he looked already, and how soon he would be back on his feet if he did what the Aes Sedai told him. He answered them curtly, trying not to sound bitter. Let them think I mean to go along. His stomach rumbled at the smells from the tray. When they left, he tossed aside his blanket and hopped out of the bed, pausing only to stuff half a slice of ham into his mouth before pouring out water to wash and shave. Staring into the mirror above the washstand, he paused, and lathering his face. He did look better.
So we see Matt waking up on his second day after the healing.
Yeah.
And it does seem like the food that he's eating is sort of magically going to his bulk. Like he eats the normal amount of food, and then everything else he eats, instead of becoming like energy, just like puts mass back on his body.
Yeah, it's, I don't know exactly how that works, but I'm going to assume magic.
Yeah, you think? But we do notice that a lot of his memory is still covered in fog. He still has those holes in his memory that he's never really going to get back.
Not really. Not
really.
Truly.
He gets them filled with something else.
New stuff.
New stuff.
Better stuff.
Well, more useful.
So he gets dressed, stomps into his beloved boots, and takes his dice and cups with him and goes out scouting, as the chapter title implies.
Right. Scouting and discoveries. But yeah, he's planning on basically gambling for money and food and clothes.
Yeah.
So he must already have this idea in his head that he is lucky. And I wonder how much of that is he turns his Taviran nature by what he wants. I don't know. I just wonder how much of that is him like, I want to be lucky, so he's lucky. It's always better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, I don't know. But going back to what you were saying, he does seem to honestly believe that he can go out gambling and come home having made a profit. And we've talked about this a bunch before, but I think the luck has always been a part of him. It's just grows throughout the series to a ridiculous level.
Agreed. And I think he's also pretty talented at dice games just in general. But I think he's also been just always a little lucky. Like he's played dice on the boats and won some coppers. And, he knows he can make some money.
As opposed to myself, like, go to Vegas and I'm just like, nope, not even trying that. That's just a good way to throw my money away. I'm like not lucky. I don't know.
Yes, I would like to spend $20 to play this game. Thank you very much. That's how I go to Las Vegas. Lauren makes a good point there that he is also pretty good at reading people, and a big part of dice is like, if you're playing liar's dice, that's got a bit of bluffing and gambling into it. Now it sounds like the games he's playing are more pure luck based, that it's just whoever has the higher roll.
I have no idea. I've never played dice, or I don't gamble. I don't gamble as a rule because I always lose. Or almost always, and I see how it's addicting.
The closest I come to gambling is the free games on my phone. And I
will pay 99 cents if your app is fun enough. But that's as close as it gets.
I consider that just like tipping the people who make the app if I actually enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. It's only $1.
But I'm not going to dump like $100 into gems to buy the coins so I can upgrade my character.
Oh yeah, hell no. I don't do that. I used to play a game like a couple of times a month a really long time ago, but it was a $5 buy-in, and there would be like 5 to 10 guys that would show up and sit in this basement and just play and talk shit all night. So that's fun because, the way I look at it is if I lose everything, I lost $5 and I had an evening of entertainment. That's cheap. Throw in some beer, $10. That's like cheaper than dinner and a movie. Way cheaper than dinner and a movie.
I definitely went to those, and I pretty much assumed I was spending the $5 or $10.
Oh yeah, I walked into it like I'm gonna lose this.
I'm gonna lose
but
this.
That's fine. But you bet with like pennies and stuff. Anyway, Matt sneaks out of his room unnecessarily because he notices there's no guard and nobody's watching, and just starts wandering around as he does.
Yeah, they have him confined to the city, or to the island.
Yeah, I don't know that there's really a difference.
That's a fair point. It's like Australia.
He's not allowed to cross the bridges,
but not the tower and the grounds, so he can be in the city.
Yeah. He wanders into a big courtyard where there's a bunch of guardsmen kind of hanging around, and he sauntered across the yard and watched the soldiers as if he had nothing better to do. He's like trying to assess how much people know, how far he's allowed to go, if he can slip by, whatever. Because Swan said, I told everyone not to let you out, but he's like, well, did you tell everyone?
Or did you just tell the captains? You
know?
Yeah, he's just trying to figure that out. I also like what he thinks when he's thinking about Elaine and Nynaeve and Egwene. Even Elaine, she's a pretty one, even if she does have her nose in the air half the time. Love those constant allusions to Elaine, like always like sticking her nose up in the air.
Snoodily.
Yeah.
So he walks up to one particular Illianer bridge guard and just kind of like asks him vague questions on conditions on the other side of the bridge that he guards. And he's like,
he
trying to
sound
be subtle.
like Bael Doman.
Yeah.
Fortune prick me. But yeah, clearly this guy, he's like, yeah, I know exactly who you are. Last night a sister came in and told us exactly you can't cross the bridge. So don't try it. I know who you are and I know what you're trying.
Because basically I'll tell you all about the conditions on the other side of the river, but nobody will let you pass.
And I 100% think that these are on orders from the Amyrlin to keep him in the city because he's blown the horn.
Yeah.
I don't think this is because he needs healing or to rest. I do think it's 100%.
He's a valuable asset now
Totally.
that they've invested in, and they're not going to just let him go.
Although they are a little arrogant that they think they can control all traffic in and out of the city.
A little arrogant. I mean, the only way he ever gets out is because Egwene gives him the writ from the Amyrlin.
True. But there's also, like, we know there's the boat holes that Gareth Bryn goes up to.
Yeah.
And he brings his soldiers in to rescue Egwene during the last battle. So there are other ways in and out. I'm willing to bet there are other ways too.
And he would have maybe eventually found one. That was a good question I saw a second ago. Oh, Khansma asked, was their plan just to keep him captive until the last battle? I don't know what their plan is, what Swan's plan is for Matt.
I think she was just going to try and tie a few more strings to him, whether that meant keeping him around for longer or tying an Aes Sedai to him or maybe like putting him in the warder training program. Like I can just see a bunch of ideas that she would have to control Matt.
Yeah.
Of course, that all would have changed when the Fire Nation attacked. I mean, when when Elida,
wrong series,
the Red Aja attacks and puts Suan in the dungeon.
The guard notes, never did I hear of so much effort to keep one sick man in the city. That's the reason, Matt said firmly. Well, I need to be going. They said I have to take walks. Lots of long walks to build up strength, He felt their eyes following him as he left, and he scowled.
Damn it. I think his luck was forcing him to be stuck until he got that letter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, he's not fit to leave the city. He really isn't.
Probably not. Not yet.
I'm sure he'd make it and all, but...
Not to ride. I think on the ship he does good because he can just rest and eat and recover.
Yeah. He had always been good at slipping into places unseen and out. It was a talent you developed when your mother always suspected you were up to some mischief, and you had 4 sisters to tell on you.
I like Vino's theory here that the plan was to take Matt down to Ilion and basically start an army down there for Rand, with basically having the horn sounder and the horn.
Moraine's original plan?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That makes sense. It's good as any.
He's wandering around these garden paths looking for some kind of gate or something, some way to get out of the tower grounds without being noticed. And a girl in Novice White appeared ahead on the path, striding purposefully towards him. She doesn't see him at first, but Matt calls out to her.
And this is Else Grinwall? Well, it looks like Else Grinwall.
Yeah. I've been saying Elsie. Am I wrong? Does Discord want to weigh in on that? Oh, Elsa?
There's Elsie. I think it's just
Elsie.
one. Yeah, Else Grinwell.
Oh.
So it's just Else.
All right, well, I'll do it that way, but I always thought Elsie seemed more like a name.
Agreed.
Else, he called out to her. Else Grinwell. You remember me, don't you? Matt Coffin. A friend and I visited your father's farm, remember? Have you decided to become Aes Sedai then? She stopped short, staring at him. What are you doing up and out? She said coldly. You know about that, do you?
Well, yes, because she just came and visited you.
And because it's Lanfear.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Let's make a point of saying that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think we were both like...
we didn't actually say that out loud yet.
But yeah, this Else has been gone from the tower for a couple of weeks. She was sent home for being basically a dunderhead that just watched the warders and had no interest in actually learning the channel.
Kissed boys all the time.
Totally. And so this is Lanfear using the Mask of Mirrors to take her face, and the reason she knows Matt should be in his bed is because she was just up there talking to him as Selene.
Yeah. And, he tries to assure her that he's not catching or anything, like he doesn't understand why she is in such a hurry. But she kind of brushes him off and walks away quickly. Says, I have things to be about.
She could give Elaine lessons on arrogance, I think is what, because he was just thinking about Elaine's arrogance. It's Lanfear's arrogance.
Yeah.
So I just love all those little clues that it's not actually Else Grinwall mixed in there. That like she has a totally different demeanor and knows things she shouldn't know. Oh, I just wanted to say one more thing about Lanfear. When she's trying to pass him, she makes sure that he steps way off the path so she doesn't come close to her. I think that's because it's Mask of Mirrors and any touch would see through it.
Oh.
And that's why she doesn't want him to come anywhere close to her.
He started off again, and soon heard a ferocious clatter from one side ahead, like dozens of sticks being beat together. Curious, he turned off toward it, into the trees, and he finds the training ground where warders train young men. Matt quickly figures out that it's warders with their students and sits down to watch the scene.
Basically, he's used up all his strength and needs to sit and rest for a minute.
He picks out Galad and Gawain sparring and the group of accepted and Aes Sedai that tend to gather to watch them.
Yeah, the flock of admirers. That's one way to say it.
I think groupies a bit, but I think probably like some of these Green Aja are like, it's gonna get a good moment in there and a connection, and I'm going to get an important warder with a powerful connections.
It kind of reminds me of like, have you ever been in a high school and there's like the football players are practicing or the cheerleaders are playing and there's a bunch of people just on the bleachers for no reason watching?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what this reminds me of, except like there's definitely a group of women who are watching one particular group of men with their swords.
I mean, yeah.
So there's like a reason to be there because it's like, oh, I should watch my warder practice. But like, there's definitely a reason they are there.
I think it's part of like partly what Lauren Sedai is saying, that they're groupie-esque group, but also some of them are seriously scouting for a skilled warder.
Sure. But there's a lot more there than there usually are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greens aren't just looking for a warder, so they say.
Right.
More than a warder.
And there, of course, the two boys are fighting under the guidance of Hammer, who's one of my favorite short-lived.
The blocky warder, who Matt describes his voice as rocks being poured out of a bucket.
And he's shaped much like a block of stone.
I like that description. Hammer calls a break between the two Andorans, and they notice Matt and walk over to say hello.
And I notice Matt gets his back up a little bit because he just sort of got dissed by Else Grinwell, who he remembers as being a flirt. And so he's like, and then he walks in and sees these two boys being admired by a bunch of women. And he's all like, why should they get the attention and not me? Yeah. So he's got a little bit of that like petulant jealousy going on during this fight. And that's part of the reason why he makes this bet.
Wonders if he's supposed to call them my lord, but decides that he doesn't care.
I'm not going to call him. And that's definitely something like he carries through.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I am not going to call anyone my lord.
He's really kind of against class. Matrim, I'm not a bloody Lord Cawthon.
Yeah, he hates nobles. Definitely doesn't want to be one.
Yeah. Well, I think Gawain asks him if he's, like, I heard you were sick, like, are you feeling any better? And he says, did he come to the practice yard to learn the sword? Galad asks him. Matt shakes his head, says, I don't know much about swords. I think I'll put my trust in a good bow or a good quarterstaff. I know how to use those.
Yes, he does.
Galad makes something like a joke. Says you'll need bow, quarterstaff, and sword to protect yourself from Nynaeve.
Even Nynaeve can bring out the humorous. I also noticed that Matt was very aware on the trip that Egwene was blushed whenever Galad was mentioned.
Yeah.
Just that old, I know it's over at this point, but evidence that it used to be Egwene and Galad. I miss them. They were so good together.
The only thing I had really was when Rand is mentioned, Gawain's look gained intensity, just something that carries throughout the series.
Well, he definitely noticed Rand.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and he noticed the attention that people were giving Rand as well. He noticed the attention Elida was giving him. Mm-hmm. He knows he's at the center of things. And he knows he's a friend of the girl he likes.
So the brothers are kind of trying to talk Matt into the usefulness of a sword and that he should learn. Like, you're here, like, come practice with us or whatever. And Matt says, swords aren't the end-all be-all, I could do fairly well against either of you, I think, if you had a sword and I had my quarterstaff. Gawain's cough was obviously meant to swallow a laugh. Much too politely, he said, you must be very good. Galad's face was frankly disbelieving. Perhaps it was that they both clearly thought he was making a wild boast. Perhaps it was because he had mishandled questioning the guardsmen. Perhaps it was because Else, who had such an eye for the boys, wanted nothing to do with him. And all those women were staring at Galad like cats watching a jug of cream. Aes Sedai and accepted or not, they were still women. All these explanations ran through Matt's head, but he rejected them angrily, especially the last. He was going to do it because it would be fun, and it might earn him some coin. His luck would not even have to be back. He's so confident. I will wager, he said, 2 silver marks and 2 from each of you, that I can beat both of you at once, just the way I said. You can't have fairer odds than that. There are 2 of you, and 1 of me, so 2 to 1 are fair odds.
How to triple your money.
He almost laughed aloud at the consternation on their faces. They kind of try to write him off. It's like, there's no need to make wagers, Gawain says. Like, you've been sick. Like, why don't you rest for a few weeks and come back and we'll happily spar with you.
And he definitely doesn't have endurance.
No.
He ends this quickly.
Galad says it wouldn't be fair. You've been sick. He says the same thing.
It really shows the effectiveness of a pole arm versus a sword.
Oh, yeah.
It was very rare. Swords were always tools of noblemen and duelists. They've very rarely been used in battle.
Not usually.
Not in mass. But again, just we bring it back to what Matt says, what Matt thinks, and what Matt does here. All very different things.
And Galad, also all confident, says something like, well, I wouldn't want Egwene to be mad at me when we invariably kick your ass.
I would not have her angry at me.
What does she have to do with it? Matt responds. Thump me once with one of your swords, and I will hand over a silver mark to each of you. If I thump you till you quit, you give me 2 each. Don't you think you can do it? This is ridiculous, Galad says.
All right, kid.
You would have no chance against 1 trained swordsman, let alone 2. I'll not take such advantage. Do you think that? Asked a gravel voice. The blocky warder joined them, thick black eyebrows pulled down in a scowl. You think the 2 of you are good enough with your swords to take 1 boy with a stick?
Or 1 Forsaken with a... Wait, no, that's the last battle, sorry.
So Hammer interferes and for some reason he really likes the idea of them both being humbled. Although now that I say that out loud, I totally get why.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Hammer's rooting for Matt. He wants his students to get beaten up.
And he understands that it's an important lesson that like a quarterstaff is a very different kind of weapon.
Yeah. Get reach, buddy.
You need to know what you're up against when you see somebody with a quarterstaff. And he also knows the legend about the farmer who beat the best swordsman of all time.
Jerome Gaiden. who I always believed to be an incarnation of Geidel Kane.
Oh, that's probably a good one.
Well, he says it later when he makes all his students repeat back to him what he wants. He says, "Who's the best swordsman of all time?" But it's Jerome Gaiden. I don't know, Stone Dog. 5 foot long swords are pretty rare. Historically, they were used only to combat pole arms. But two-handed swords weren't really used to fight other people. They were used to chop wood, literally. That's why people carried those crazy-looking ones, especially, that have, like, lots of guards on them. Although, I don't know what warders train with. I figure they're, like, the cavalry-style-looking swords that we usually see. One edge, but two-handed in the Wheel of Time, usually. Not that it says in this scene, but that's what I always assumed.
And now this is based on a true story and or true legend. And I have to mention it, or else people yell at me.
Oh, I didn't know that it was based on a real story.
Miyamoto Musashi, a samurai, it said he won up to 61 duels and his only loss to was a farmer with a quarterstaff.
Oh, the Book of the Five Rings. I've heard of that.
Miyamoto Musashi. But he was also, had 2 swords and very similar Geidel Kane type stuff. So I like the idea that he is a reincarnation of Geidel Kane.
The warder eyed Matt up and down doubtfully. "Are you sure you're up to this, lad? Now I take a close look at you. You ought to be in a sick bed." "I'm already out of one," Matt said, "and I'm up to it. I have to be. I don't want to lose my 2 marks." "You mean to hold to that wager, lad?" "I need the money," Matt laughed. Takes a long time picking a staff. He picks a thick one. It says 2 inches thick and a foot taller than he is, so it's 7 feet long.
Yeah, and he keeps that staff too.
Yeah.
Not only does he
I
get
like
his...
that small detail later. Nobody tells him to put it back, so he just walks away with it.
Gets my 4 silver and a quarterstaff.
"Luck," he muttered. "Time to toss the dice." Hammer gave him an odd look. "You speak the old tongue, lad?"
Only when he's not thinking about it. So he doesn't seem to have a lot of old tongue phrases at this point. Just a couple of basic ones like time to toss the dice and forward the heart guard.
Yeah.
But I think this is all him accessing his past life.
And accidentally, he doesn't even know what he's doing.
No, I don't think so either. But I wonder how much of his fighting skill here also comes from accessing this like life of a battle general that he seems to have been talking about right after he woke up from his healing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously he's one of the best quarterstaff fighters in the 2 rivers, other than Tam Althorin,
right,
his father. But I do wonder in this last surge here, well, let's get to it, but I wonder if maybe he's accessing some old battle memories.
Maybe. "No wager," Gawain said. "There's no wager." At the same time, Galad said, "I'll not take your money like this." "I mean to take yours," Matt said. "Done," Hammer roared. "If they have not the nerve to cover your wager, lad, I'll pay the score myself."
And collect from the boys later.
Yeah.
He's not paying that out of his own pocket.
So this is like a page and a half, and
You want to just
go for it?
Read Matt beating the snot out of Terrible Duo?
Sure. The moment's warning was all Matt needed. As Galad rushed at him, he slid his hands along the quarterstaff and pivoted. The end of the staff thudded into the tall man's ribs, bringing a grunt and a stumble. Matt let the staff bounce off Galad and spun, carrying it on around just as Gawain came within range. The staff dipped, darted under Gawain's practice sword, and clipped his ankle out from under him. As Gawain fell, Matt completed the spin in time to catch Galad across his upraised wrists, sending his practice sword flying. As if his wrist did not pain him at all, Galad threw himself into a smooth, rolling dive, and came up with his sword in both hands. Ignoring him for the moment, Matt half-turned, twisting his wrist to whip the length of the staff back beside him. Gawain, just starting to rise, took the blow on the side of the head with a loud thump, only partly softened by the padding of hair. He went down in a heap.
Yay!
Matt was only vaguely aware of an Aes Sedai rushing out to tend Elaine's fallen brother. "I hope he's all right. He should be. I've hit myself harder than that falling off a fence." He still had Galad to deal with, and from the way Galad was poised on the balls of his feet, sword raised precisely, he had begun to take Matt seriously. Matt's legs chose that moment to tremble. Light, I can't weaken now. But he could feel it creeping back in. The wobbly feeling. The hunger as if he had not eaten for days. If I wait for him to come to me, I'll fall on my face. It was hard to keep his knees straight as he started forward. Luck, stay with me. From the first blow, he knew that luck, or skill, or whatever had brought him this far, was still there. Gell had managed to turn that one with a sharp clack, and the next, and the next, and the next, but strain stiffened his face. That smooth swordsman, almost as good as the warders, fought with every ounce of skill to keep Matt's staff from him. He did not attack. It was all he could do to defend. He moved continually to the side, trying not to be forced back, and Matt pressed him, staff a blur, and Gallad stepped back again, wooden blade a thin shield against the quarterstaff. Hunger gnawed at Matt as if he had swallowed weasels. Sweat rolled down into his eyes, and his strength began to fade as if it leached out with the sweat. Not yet. I can't fall yet. I have to win. Now. With a roar, he threw all his reserves into one last surge. The quarterstaff flickered past Gallad's sword, and in a quick succession, struck knee, wrist, and ribs, and finally thrust into Gallad's stomach like a spear. With a groan, Gallad folded over, fighting not to fall. The staff quivered in Matt's hands, on the point of a final crushing thrust to the throat. Gallad sank to the ground. Matt dropped the quarterstaff when he realized what he had been about to do.
So, yeah, that's a flashback, I think, right to battle.
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's why he's on the verge of killing him, is that he, in that last surge, there's some overlap between what's going on in his memories and what's going on in the real world. And we see that with the cleansing, like during the healing, we see that with his memory, and we see it now, where he's just taken back to battle. And later when he's asked, where are you from? And instead of saying Two Rivers, he says Manetheren.
Yeah.
That's because he is real, that's that memory coming forward from this reincarnation.
That's a good point. And yeah, he does get really amped up. And I don't want to get a ton into it because I'm really not an expert, but the little bit of sparring and stuff that I've done in Western martial arts, you have a really strong advantage against someone with a much shorter weapon than you, especially if it's when it's lighter and longer. It doesn't,
Sure.
The weight doesn't really matter because you're swinging a 7-foot stick. So if someone has a 3 or even a 4-foot sword, which is a long sword, a long piece of steel, you can still they're so far from you that you don't even have to deal with their swords. I remember doing this all the time. I would just deal with, because I have a little bit of reach, so I tended to rely on, you don't deal with the sword, you just deal with their hands. If you can just hit them in the hands, on the knuckles, you make their life really hard. So Gawain and Gallad have to close a significant distance to even get close to Matt.
Someone's making a point that they were unarmed, so anywhere he could strike them, they just went down. Whereas if you're hitting someone who's armored in the knee, it's not gonna, you really have to crush the armor. But then that's gonna slow them down all that much more with the armor.
I never practiced with armor. I know some guys that got into that, but it's expensive.
Right. Yeah.
Even the fake plastic stuff to that just represents.
But yeah, I do think this is just major old blood coming out in Matt, as we see in other battle situations.
Oh yeah. And
after the penny polishing.
Yeah, penny polish.
Yep.
He kind of, I'm leaning more and more towards that, so when a soul is reincarnated in the Watt world, you have a separation between you and your old lives. You're not supposed to be able to remember.
Sure.
But lots of Matt in this incarnation has been cleaned away. It was infected and then polished away by the Aes Sedai.
And what you can see underneath it, where the holes are, well, if you look down far enough, you see another life under there. You see a previous life.
I like to think of it as, the barrier thinning.
Mm-hmm.
What was once a thick piece of cloth is now threadbare, and sometimes stuff gets through. That's kind of how I think of it.
And I think that happens, up until he gets all those holes filled, and then he has all the other memories too.
Yeah.
And we see a similar passing through that barrier, of course, with Rand. As he's going insane, the memories are coming forward.
Same kind of thing, I think.
Same kind of thing,
yeah.
I
feel.
But Rand's insanity turns those memories into a mad voice in his head.
Yeah.
And so the memories are real, but the voice is not. Matt's sort of thinning of the barrier is good foreshadowing for what's happening with Rand, as we're seeing that sort of past life come forward.
Mm-hmm. Same kind of deal, like, as his mind's being ripped apart, the holes, in quotes, let things through.
Yep.
This is where Hammer walks over to Galad and just kind of looks at him and then looks out at his students and says, "Who was the greatest blade master of all time?" And dozens of students stay in unison, "Jerome Gaiden." Oh, Jerome, Gaiden. So somebody named Jerome. Hammer's the Gaiden.
I don't think Jerome was a warder, was he?
No, I just read that wrong earlier. Jerome, Gaiden. They're addressing him, giving him an answer and addressing their teacher. "Yes," Hammer shouted, turning to make sure all heard. "During his lifetime, Jerome fought over 10,000 times. In battle and single combat, he was defeated once by a farmer with a quarterstaff. Remember that. Remember what you just saw." And he tells Galad that he just lost, basically. He's like, "You're still on the ground. Like, you give up."
You can't get up. You're done. And just know that, like, a quarterstaff in the right conditions, in the right hands, is a dangerous, dangerous weapon.
Sure, it's not really lesser.
No. And, of course, Gawain gets healed up right quick by a bunch of admiring Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
Where he got a little split skull. So he has some blood in his hair, but he's totally healed, like, within seconds.
Well, he is humble about it. He pushed 2 silver marks into Matt's hand with a dry, "I think I will listen next time." He noticed Matt's glance, touched his head. They healed it, but it was not bad. "Elena's given me worse more than once."
I'm trying to, like, what the heck? What did she, like, split his
Throw
skull?
something at him or
yeah,
something?
Like,
I don't know.
Jeez, talk about a violent relationship there. Here's where he mentions that his dad and Rand's dad are even better.
Yeah.
At which point Gawain gets, like, a speculative look into his eyes. Thinking about Rand there. Probably thinking about, like, the warrior qualities of the land.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Tam's a blade master.
Yeah, that's true.
Tam could probably beat all 3 of them.
With one hand tied behind his back.
While giving them some philosophical lecture. The next thing I really have is Gawain says, "I'll wager you those 2 marks of mine in your hand that some of them wish they could."
They're talking about bonding Galad while healing him. Yeah, and I thought that was interesting foreshadowing for what Alana does to Rand later.
It kind of is.
The Greens are around him, and Alana's one of the Greens. And, of course, Galad being Rand's half-brother.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of the parallels between them. That always takes me to again, doing my Harry Potter adaptation, I always think of Galad as the other boy.
Neville.
Neville, yes. Galad is my Neville. That's basically how I think about it. If Harry Potter is Rand.
Oh, so Gawain says, I'll wager you those 2 marks of mine in your hand that some of them wish they could." "Not your marks," Matt said, shoving them into his coat pocket. "Mine."
I beat you. And then they kind of both look at Galad and go, "He's not that good looking." No, he's not. No.
And, yeah, I really like that Matt also said, "So do you think they would mind if I go collect my wager from Galad now?" And he's like laying on the ground. It's like, I think that they would. Yeah. Oh, Hammer says.
Right. So he's covering it.
Not very popular with those women right now.
And this is where he asks Matt, "Where are you from?" And he says, "Manetherin. I mean, I'm from the 2 rivers. I've heard so many old stories." Mm-hmm. You don't just get that wrong. It's like, you don't get your name wrong. You don't get where you're from wrong. Manetherin doesn't just come out of your mouth unless you're being influenced.
I'll read this last couple paragraphs.
Here, he keeps the quarterstaff.
"Here," the warder said, pushing 2 more silver coins into Matt's hand. "I will collect from Galad later. Where are you from, lad?" "Manetherin." Matt froze when he heard the name come out of his mouth. "I mean, I'm from the 2 rivers. I've heard too many old stories." They just looked at him without saying anything. "I think I'll go back and see if I can find something to eat." Not even mid-morning bell had rung yet, but they nodded as if it made sense. He kept the quarterstaff. No one had told him to put it back, and he walked slowly until the trees hid him from the practice yard. When they did, he leaned on the staff as though it were the only thing holding him up. He was not sure it was not. He thought that if he parted his coat, he would see a hole where his stomach should have been, a hole growing larger as it pulled the rest of him in. But he hardly thought of hunger. He kept hearing voices in his head. "You speak the old tongue, lad?" "Manetherin." It made him shiver. Light help me. I keep digging myself deeper. I have to get out of here. But how? He hobbled back toward the tower proper like an old, old man. How?
I like that he uses up all his energy in the fight. Now he's like, I need food. I need food. I'm hungry.
I like this debate happening in Discord right now, the parallel between Harry Potter and Wheel of Time characters.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I kind of feel like Egwene is more Hermione.
I was going to agree with that. Moraine is clearly Dumbledore.
Yes.
I think we agreed Elida is Umbridge. Thank you.
Who is Snape? Farron?
Well, he's the double agent, so on one hand, yes. On the other hand, no one really likes Snape. Everyone loves Farron.
Shiriam?
Oh, yeah. We'll go with Shiriam. Asmodean. Okay. See the argument for that. The Red Ajah is clearly Slytherin. It's not the bad Ajah. It's just where all the bad people are. I think blue and green would both fit into Gryffindor. Oh, yeah. Blue is Ravenclaw, maybe. I can see that. Yeah, see, I'd say brown is more... Yeah, brown and white are Ravenclaw. I'd agree with that. Yellow. I don't know about yellow. Hufflepuff? Okay.
Got a new bartending job at a place down the street. That'll be cool. See how it goes anyway. Doing a working interview on Saturday.
Well, because they had one bartender cut, like, tip of his finger off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Don't cut your fingers off. Rule number 1 of bartending. What the fuck was he doing? Cutting an orange?
Yep.
Come on. What are you, new? To cut, slice up 150 lemons every day that I worked at the other place. It was just part of your side work. That's what it is. But it was cool. I didn't even apply or ask.
No, yeah, because I was sitting there and he sat down and he was like, so your friend Patrick, is he interested in a job? And I was like, I think he is. I think at this place you're not going to worry about it. It's a pretty family friendly restaurant.
Yeah.
It's like a bar with
in 6 years
food.
there, I only subtly cut someone off once, but it's pretty relatively easy, especially when you're stone cold sober and you're dealing with someone who's wasted, because I'm pretty I get it, I go to bars to get drunk too, right. That's what kind of why they're there.
But there's drunk and there's drunk and then there's asshole drunk, sloppy
wasted. Yeah, I don't really, I have worked in a bar like that, but
yeah, this isn't that kind of bar.
At that place, nobody cared. You can get sloppy wasted.
This place, the only people getting sloppy wasted is the one really old guy who's been there all night drinking heavily in the corner. And you're like, okay, buddy, you're lonely. That's okay.
I don't even care if people get pretty drunk. Just don't bother other people. If you're yelling at girls across on the other side of the bar, then it's a problem. But other than that, I don't care. Yes, no puking also.
Oh, God, yeah.
Or at least excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, slurring your words as little as possible, puke quietly. As long as I don't know. If I can't tell, if I don't really see it, then I don't care.
My issue is when I get really drunk, I want to fall asleep on the bar. And that's also looked upon fairly poorly.
Oh, I've got a...
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?